This will be the most depressing NBA basketball episode of your lives.
I was gonna say you got the nice Zen music to really just like calm everything down before we get into the annual impending doom episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast.
Yep, if you were looking forward to it from last year, here we go again.
It's crazy because I'm in such a good mood otherwise because so many other NBA things happen, and like I'm genuinely excited to be back with you. And more importantly, I think before we get into anything, because like, look, there's gonna be plenty of Sixers doom. Y'all can stay tuned for that. Their Loki is gonna be. It's a shame almost. It's kind of fitting if we had Tim back for this episode because there's a lot of Phoenix Suns doom to be had on this episode as well. Among a whole lot of other things. But I do think we start most importantly because I got to be honest, there was a split second where it's like, we're kind of playing it day by day. I didn't know if we'd get to this point around. But my partner, our pal Justin Kuzart, will be taking most likely a few weeks off minimum after this episode because you have a child coming in a few days.
And I might have gone on a sports show that is aired on an AM signal here in Jacksonville and said that if the 76ers won the whole thing, I was going to name my kid after Embiid. We don't have to do that.
See, that was a good bet by you because you never have to worry about that happening. So
yeah, we were debating because like Embiid, they were, the guys, Casey and Brian were saying they thought Embiid was a good name for a girl. And I was like, I feel like if I'm going to do a Sixers name, I would just go with like Maxine and name it after Tyrese Maxey. Because that's Maxine, like, makes more sense a little bit.
You could do Joel as like a Joe or a Joelle.
Joelina.
I don't know about that. Now we're making things up.
What did I said? I said Embiidarella. They were like, no, dude. So,
I don't
but
know if he
way,
deserves it after that game, which is which I again we'll get into a little bit later. We got a whole lot to talk about on this podcast. Ja Morant's got guns on Instagram live again.
Dude.
Oh, by the way, the conference finals are going on. More importantly, there's some actual hoop being played.
And we had the lottery, I guess, drawing go down last night, and not rigged at all. But San Antonio wins it for the third time.
Well, so that of course is what we're going to talk about again, the NBA draft lottery, and of course in the Wobble for Wemby sweepstakes, the San Antonio Spurs are your big winner. Number two is going to Sharp.
Well, hold on. It has nothing to do with the fact that they have ties with Tony Parker and Boris Diaw and all the bigs that they've had in the past. There's no ties there, right? It's just
For the record, we're being sarcastic and we don't really think this rigged, but I do think it's some insane like basketball karma. And that's my point. Like on one hand, I'm really happy for the Spurs because like Wemby's going to get to go in and be coached by Coach Pop and realistically just hit the ground running. Obviously, we know Pop is one of the OGs of really getting the most out of international players. Wembanyama seems to be the ultimate international player so far, at least prospect-wise at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I have a hard time. Woj is saying he's the best prospect of all time, and it's just like, LeBron James lived in this lifetime not that long ago. It's like LeBron James' high school games were on ESPN, and I get it, but I don't know if I'm there yet.
I have seen a lot of the ESPN Wemby LeBron comparisons and why one's better ranking than this one and that one.
Wemby being in that conversation, and I think he's deservingly in that conversation with LeBron, should say enough. I don't know if I'm saying he's the best prospect of all time when LeBron James exists. The point, though, regardless, obviously this is a super great place for him to develop. For San Antonio, you look at the roster, and they're not going to be a lock, I don't think, to make the playoffs next year, but they could be hovering around playing territory if this kid's as good as he's advertised to be right away.
So that's what I wanted to ask you. I mean, 22 wins last year, or this season still technically going on. 22 wins. The Mavericks in the play-in were at 38 wins. Quickly, what was brought up on NBA.com is the Spurs went 56-26 in their first season with David Robinson. They went 56-26 in their first season with Tim Duncan. So do we see them go 56-26? Because that would be insanity.
That would be actually insane. No,
because that would be that's good. That's three. Hold on, let me make sure I got it right. That's three better wins than the Nuggets had this year.
Yeah, and that's why I don't think it's happening. Like, we're assuming they're not only going to be the best, and plus, when Tim Duncan came in, they already had David Robinson still. Like, that Spurs team was way more complete to when Duncan came in. I mean, they won a title with him and being there. What, it was 2 years before they won
Hmm.
the first title in '99? So, no, I don't think the Spurs are going to come in. Like, they're just not there yet. I love Keldon Johnson. Uh,
Yeah.
what's his name? Sochan made the all rookie team, but that's two pieces. Like, I think Wemby's going to be great, but no, I don't think they're going to
Do
make
you
that sort of leap.
do you think I mean, I think the obvious answer would have been Portland, but do you think out of the winners, which I don't know if we've actually given the list, San Antonio got one, Charlotte, Portland, Houston, Detroit rounding out the top 5. Out of those 5, do you think like San Antonio was the one that was the quickest win now? I think the obvious point is to Dame and Portland because you pair Wemby and Dame up, it's like, okay, let's go win this thing. I also think if you look at Detroit and you look at Houston with the young guys they already have, it's like, okay, that's a pretty good core of guys. You could probably start trying to win now because I know Wemby said, I'm trying to win a ring as soon as possible. So be ready.
The super team would have been as if he somehow ended up in Orlando. Like, if you got Wemby and you got Bankero and you got Franz Wagner and some of the other younger guys that they got in there, Cole Anthony,
That'd been fun.
yeah, they'd have been instantly really, really good. I mean, Detroit, I think, because your top two with the thought of Wemby and Cade Cunningham would have been really intriguing, assuming Cade bounces back from injury, but that's the hit the ground running there. And Detroit's probably the big loser here, obviously jumping back to 5. And it's funny, I put in my Orlando friends group chat, I said, oh man, because when they were going through the lottery representatives, I was like, sick. Detroit's got Ben Wallace. I was like, good luck with those vibes tonight. And then they instantly just took the
Yep.
wrath of like the worst of it, dropping to 5. Um,
It was
I,
quite literally the worst possible outcome for them.
so yeah, yeah. I mean, Houston too, feeling that way just because it's a division rival. I mean, Detroit's at least in the East. You're staying
Well,
away from him.
and Houston taking a little bit of an L with Wemby making like a hell yes vibe face on the video.
Yeah,
Interpret
not
it
going
how
to
you
4.
want. Taking a
Yeah,
little taking a
and
little
those
bit of a
ties are
loss.
there, and that's the thing is, like, we've said all the good stuff. I mean, my negative of my hating part of it is like, yo, the Spurs got to draft Tim Duncan in 1997, and now you get a number 1, and it just happens to be in the generational guy. Like, the Spurs had 2 years of tanking and end up with two of the best, or one of the best players in NBA history, and one of the best prospects that we've ever seen. So I'm just hating a little bit. I feel like some of the, like, I don't know, man, give Charlotte something. We talk about Charlotte's
Yeah.
misery all the time. You could add Melo and you could add Wemby. Same deal with Portland.
And I
Portland would have been the one where I think they win the most games immediately because you're right.
yeah,
They have Damian Lillard. Like, he's just,
Dame. Which
assuming you bring Jeremy Grant back as well, like, there's just
which
more talent on that roster ready to go.
which brings me to the Blazers a little bit. I feel like the other two storylines that kind of came out of last night's lottery drawing is the Blazers going to be picking at number 3, which you would imagine if they want to win now with Dame, they might shop that third pick around a little bit. So depending on where your um, mock drafts go and where you think people should go, I wonder what teams and what stars might be considered in a conversation like that. And then the other part is the Mavs um essentially were right to lose that game. They got the 10th overall pick, so they don't lose that pick and probably shop that as well to potentially get Luca, another player to help him on the offensive side or defensive side.
Yeah, I guess it just depends who's available too. That's the thing. We'll start to see how the market shakes out. Like Portland at 3 is definitely the most intriguing. You're right. And I think they're kind of in a win-win depending what direction they want to go. Because you're right. If you start packaging number 3, you can get somebody pretty good if they become available.
I would imagine, yeah.
I don't know though that Portland should bite and be in a rush to trade number 3 either. Like, you're either going to get at number 3, you're either going to get Brandon Miller or Scoot Henderson is what it looks like. Like, Scoot's been the number 2 pretty much all year long. But Brandon Miller rose pretty quickly. I know there was a little bit of trouble like off the court at Alabama with the murder weapon thing, which is a wild sentence. Like, I feel like that is, that's something that teams will definitely do their research on. But yeah, but Brandon Miller is probably, I don't think he's going any lower than 3. It just depends what Portland wants to do, and that's always the looming question here, right? Is it's like if you're going to trade Damian Lillard, you're going to get a lot back, and then you should definitely keep the number 3 and just fully hit the reset
But
button.
are they?
And
I
I don't
don't know.
think they
Yeah.
are. That's the thing. If it sounds like the front office is going to bring Jeremy Grant back, that's a win now move. If you're doing that and you're spending that money, like they do have a couple of other younger guys in place. Anthony Simons is there. We'll see what happens. We see how Shaden Sharp develops. You know, Portland could also entice the package with 3 and try to pry somebody a little better. Again, I just don't know who that is. Like, I don't know who becomes available. And again, we'll see how this. Again, it's the NBA. Like, there's always going to be someone available who we may not have known was available. But in terms of sheer flexibility, you got to feel pretty good if you're Portland, because like at the very worst, you're drafting a really highly touted young prospect at 3. Like you got some luck in the lottery. Dame's value is not going to go down as long as he's still, healthy and playing great. So that helps as well. Dame has one of those games that is aging well.
And I agree. So if anybody else is wondering, the rest of the lottery order goes Orlando picking 6th, Indiana picking 7th, Washington 8th, Utah 9th, Dallas 10th, like we alluded to. Orlando again, which is from Chicago as a part of an earlier trade.
That's probably the Vucevic trade.
Yep. And then the OKC at 12th. I don't know why I said the OKC. OKC at 12th, Toronto at 13, and NOLA at number 14.
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty chalky otherwise.
Yeah.
There weren't any really big jumps. I mean, again, Detroit is probably your big loser here.
Yep.
Orlando, you got to feel good about 6 and 11. They could package that again if they want to move up, if there's somebody in particular. Houston at 4 is a little bit rough as well. Obviously, your winner without a doubt is San Antonio. Charlotte's in the middle. Like, again, you're still getting one of the top 3 guys. I don't think you necessarily are super upset about that. But again, it's like you just miss a generational prospect. I forget the one tweet I saw earlier, but Charlotte has really, like, every time they've had a 2, it's been a painful miss on the 1 where it's somebody where it's just like, of course it was them. And, I think for Portland, or I mentioned Portland, obviously San Antonio being able to draft Wemby is the clear and obvious winner. Like, this is what you did this for. Like, this is why you went in the tank last season. It's the chance to draft a generational player. Popovich may never retire at this point. I know he keeps saying he's going to transition here, but I do. If Wemby's as good as everybody says he's going to be, then they're going to be a whole lot better sooner than later.
Yep. And so I'm trying to pull up right now the Hornets' second pick in the first round. I see LaMelo, he was 3rd. It looks like the first one's going to be Michael Kidd Gilchrist. 2012.
Who's number 1 that draft?
Huh?
Who was number 1 that draft?
In 2012?
It was Blake Griffin, wasn't it?
I think so. Hold on.
Yeah, obviously, that's pretty unfortunate.
Yeah, NBA draft. Let's see. Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And that obviously back when they were the Bobcats. And then Bradley Beal went right after.
Yeah, well, Bradley Beal's unfortunate. I mean, Anthony Davis is obviously, he was one of those can't misses.
So that's when the Bobcats picked. Yeah, the Bobcats picked 2nd. They went with Kidd Gilchrist. You had Bradley Beal go after him, Dame go after him, Andre Drummond go after him.
So they've had 3 well, I guess they haven't had 3 number 2 picks because, well, yeah, no, I mean, I guess, how did that work record wise? And I should know this.
Okafor in 2004.
No, their 3 picks have been Okafor, Alonzo Mourning, who obviously was great for them for a few years, and then the other one was Kidd Gilchrist. I think the Bobcats records count as the current Hornets records. I'm trying to remember how that worked with New Orleans, obviously, because they were the Hornets of Charlotte and then went to New Orleans, but now they're back. So yeah, I don't know. Either way, they're going to get somebody really good, so it's hard to call them a loser. Like I said, you walk out here with Scooter Henderson or Brandon Miller, you got to feel pretty good. But yeah, when you're that close to Wemby, like you talk about Charlotte, they've been searching for that generational star for a while. They've never really had one, and they're just 1 pick away, unfortunately. Just day late, $1 short. Welcome everybody to the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. My name is Kevin Rayfuse. Joining me as always, my co-host Justin Kuzart.
Celtics in 5.
Oh, I thought that was going to be like low key my prediction from last round. I had them in 6, unfortunately. I guess I did a little better. They were in 7. Celtics in 5. Celtics in 5 does feel right. I said Celtics in 6, but I think. Okay, I mean, I want to get into all my conference finals thoughts right away. So are they a former Celtic or no?
Former Celtic. Yep.
Isaiah Thomas.
No.
Okay, he's on Twitter a lot, so that was my guess.
This guy has been pretty quiet. Went through, I'll call it, if I remember it correctly, a little bit of a controversy with ESPN.
Oh, so Paul Pierce, got
Yeah.
it. Okay, so Paul, gotcha. Um, I don't want to get too much into our conference finals takes. I'm just going to say that for after the break. But we will. We have to talk about, of course, the Western Conference Finals. Already is at game one in the books, but we are going to, essentially give our full preview of what we think was going to happen with Dallas and the Lakers, where they go after game one. Of course, the
You mean,
Heat and the Celtics, as of
oh,
recording this, are tipping off tonight. We're going to talk about that series as well. Who's balling, who's fallen, and then get into our, second round elimination. For us as Sixers fans, just venting session, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But we'll talk about the second round exits and where disappointing or who's the most disappointing and where they go from here.
yep. Yep. And obviously, we are on YouTube. So if you want to watch a video version of the podcast, if that's how you consume your podcasts, you can find us there. You can subscribe. That way, you know when new episodes are coming out.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
So we want to jump into the conference finals, or you want to have our venting session?
No, absolutely. Let's do conference finals. No, we got to talk about the good stuff right away.
Okay, and you want to start with the Eastern Conference Finals because
you tell me this
one
is your last episode before you're going, so I'm following your lead today.
Let's do Eastern Conference Finals because I believe the game is tonight, if I'm not mistaken. So,
yep.
Obviously Celtics versus the Heat. Shout out to the Heat for absolutely defying what I would say most people did not think they would be here. So, defying the odds to get to where they are now. Although, although this is not new for them. So, pull up the clips of Jimmy Butler saying, "We'll be back and let's do it again." And, here we are.
It's just remarkable because their offense was so bad in the regular season. And I think because they were 3 minutes away from getting eliminated by Chicago, like they got smoked in the first play-in game by Atlanta.
Yeah.
Bam looked horrible. Jimmy looked kind of the depth wasn't there. I mean, even more remarkably, it's not, it's not like they've been without more injuries. Like Tyler Hero and Victor Oladipo both went out pretty early. I mean, there's a chance they get Hero back if they're able to advance or maybe late in this conference finals, but he's even taken shots yet at this point. Like that feels like a pretty hefty long shot at this point.
And was it remind me or correct me if I'm wrong, it might have been last year. Didn't like Duncan Robinson just not get played at all in the playoffs?
Oh yeah, Duncan Robinson signed that big deal and just instantly was hard. And that's been this season mostly. Duncan Robinson's largely been stapled to the bench. He's got that big contract, but he hasn't been playing minutes for them. And I mean, the thing is, like, he's always been a great shooter, but it's the other flaws in his game. It's the fact that he can't keep up on the defensive end. But that's kind of the remarkable part of this, right? Like, they were 27th in the league in 3-point efficiency this year, and now they just can't miss. Like, Max Strus is out here drilling it shots. Gabe Vincent's drilling shots. Caleb Martin's drilling shots. Like,
and it's worth mentioning the Heat are outscoring their opponents by 16.8 points per 100 possessions with Duncan Robinson on the floor.
Yeah, we know Spo is one of the better coaches in the league. Like, everybody should know that by now at this point. But this really is like one of his ultimate coaching jobs because I just don't like this team isn't that good. It's remarkable how they've gotten this far. I mean, we know what Jimmy is, but like the supporting cast is not even close to what it should be at its peak. And yet they're still finding ways to win. Like, and I'm not really going to knock the bracket either because I think there are people who will go, oh, well, they just beat the Knicks. Maybe the Knicks weren't as good, but it's like, yo, you steamrolled the Bucks in the first round. Like really, you're faking the funk against the Bucks. I don't think obviously you're not doing that. So, that said, I think Boston is going to beat them. All that to say that I do. I think Boston is the better team. They're deeper. I don't know. Like, they've been here too. It's not like they have playoff inexperience. I feel like Tatum is really finding his groove, like especially the way the series ended against Philly, 51 points in game 7, the way that he closed out game 6. Like, it just feels like Jaylen Brown had that tweet, the energy is shifting, which is what he tweeted last year when they really started turning up. I don't know. Like, I just feel like, again, the Celtics have so many bodies that they can throw at the Heat that the Heat are going to need everything to go right. Like, again, it's a margin of error thing for me here. And I'm hard pressed to just bet against Jimmy Butler doing anything at this point. But I do. I think Boston is starting to figure it out.
To,
They've had weird closeout games, but I mean, give Joe Mazzulla a lot of credit too. Like after that game 5 in Philly, he was getting killed and kind of rightfully getting killed for his and he adjusted, made the winning adjustments in game 6 and 7. Like it feels like he's clicking a little more now as well. Though he is obviously going to have a tough matchup. Like Miami will without a doubt have the coaching advantage here. Like Spo is arguably the best coach in the
well,
league.
one-on-one, well, I guess it's not one-on-one, but, Jimmy or Tatum, which one are you putting your trust in more at this point?
Man, that's a tough question because I would say Tatum. I think Tatum's the better player overall, and you got to feel good the way Game 7 closed. But Tatum's also had weird moments against the
Yeah.
Sixers too,
But
where he
that's the
just and in
thing
other
is
series where he kind of has just vanished in the fourth quarter, where he and Jalen
but
Brown play this weird passive game where neither of them want to shoot. And Jimmy, we know, is never going to do that, right? Like Jimmy's going to go
mhm.
out swinging. Jimmy has had a stinker or two in these playoffs. Like the second game they lost to the Knicks, I think he only had 18 points or something like
Well,
that.
and
But
I'll say
I don't know.
with Tatum too is like I want to say it was game 3 or maybe it was game 3 where he just couldn't hit a shot.
No, my Jalen Brown tweeted numbers when I said I think Jalen Brown is better than Tatum.
Oh gosh.
And I my thinking with that is just when Jalen Brown's on a heater, I don't think anything can stop him. And I don't think the weird thing with Jalen Brown sometimes too is he also just again the passivity thing where sometimes he
Mhm.
just will then stop shooting. Like 2 of the losses to the Sixers, I think he had like between 3 and 5 shots in the second half. Like that's just insane for somebody of his caliber. Um but man, when he gets going, he just makes everything. And that was kind of where that tweet was coming from. Like, again, I feel like Tatum is the best player overall, especially like Tatum just needs to stop settling for threes a lot of the time, too. Like, Tatum is
Yeah.
so good at getting to the hole and just, if not making it, getting fouled. Like, he was really giving the Sixers fits and getting them in foul trouble. Like, that'll open up the threes, but I feel like he just jacks a lot of those threes sometimes, too. That's not necessarily like the Celtics' best offense is when the ball is moving around, and I feel
Yeah.
like that's when they get those open looks. Obviously the rebound battle is going to be huge. You've got Horford and Rob Williams going with a double big lineup. Like that's going to be what Boston's starting with. What does Miami do? Bam is a great defender. He's going to be down there banging as well. But I'm interested to see what the adjustment is there. If Miami tries to go small, really spread the floor, but it does. It feels like the Celtics just tick up a defensive, like we talked about their defense, and that was what was missing a little bit last episode. And at times, because they have so many guards, like maybe you sacrifice a little bit. Like Rob Williams, I don't know if he's 100% or not, but it sure feels like when he's out there, that's just when they become way more intimidating to me.
Which is interesting too, because I felt like after game 1, we were kind of like, oh, maybe that's where you can exploit them. Game 1 against the 76ers,
Yeah.
where it was like, Williams seems a little, something's not right. Like maybe that's where you can exploit. And then it was just like, nope, nope, that's not going to
But that's
work.
part of the Celtics, though, right? Like the Celtics, after that first game, just kind of admitted that they took it off. And it felt like a little bit with that the Atlanta series, too, where it's
Yeah.
like, contenders don't take games off. But that said, they still here. They're still here right now.
Yep.
I do think this is a pretty fortuitous break. Like, I never want to underestimate this Miami team the way they've gone, but it's like, I think you look around, it's like you just dispatched the Sixers, you survived the challenge there. You've already like Milwaukee's already out. I can't see this Miami team keeping pace with Boston for 6 or 7 games. I just don't. Like and I'm giving Jimmy a lot of credit. Like I think Jimmy's going to get them 1 or 2 games on his own.
Yeah.
This really is like I mean Bill Simmons again calls them the Heat zombies. Like this is the ultimate Heat zombie movie. And a lot of that's Kyle Lowry too. Like we mentioned Kyle Lowry. Kyle Lowry's had a really good playoffs.
Hmm.
But I've got Boston in 6 here. I still think they've got too much. I think they've got enough to, again, on the perimeter to dominate. I think their defensive intensity is really ticked up. And that to me is the key. Like, I think they're just going to be able to control the interior, really kind of make Jimmy's life miserable. Again, just the number of bodies you can throw at him between Brogdon, between Derek White, between Jalen Brown, between Tatum. Like, it's just going to wear guys out.
Yep, and I agree with you. I don't think again, I would love for the Heat to win more than anything, honestly. But I don't think it happens. I think this is Boston's year, at least to come out of the East again, and we'll see. Where they end up on on the Western Conference side of things, which we already have Game 1 of that done from last night. The Lakers losing to the Nuggets, and I was kind of telling you off the mic, I felt like it was a bad sign for the Lakers to get a good performance out of Anthony Davis and still lose.
Yeah, and I mean, so that's the double-sided sword, right? Because the Nuggets and Lakers first game was interesting because on one hand, if you're the Lakers, you got to feel pretty good and you go, "Hey, we battled back.
Yep,
We had a really good shot to win at the end of the game." I mean, I mean, they're down 3 points. You got kind of a rare ill-advised LeBron James pull-up 3. Uh, and that really kind of took the momentum out of it. And so I think you got to feel pretty good. You go, hey, maybe we figured some stuff out. Specifically, putting Hachimura on Jokic and then kind of allowing AD to roam a little bit. I think
yep.
they had a lot of success there. I also think, on the other hand, if you're Denver, we still won that game. We held on after we blew a pretty substantial lead, but for large portions of that game, we dominated. We didn't lose our home court, and they're going to adjust too. Like, that's the thing, is it's like, sure, the Lakers made this adjustment, but like, I think Denver's going to come back. So yeah, I feel pretty good. I mean, the way that their depth played, Aaron Gordon looked great defensively again. Bruce Brown was huge off the bench, especially in closing minutes. Give Porter Jr. some or some selflessness, I should say. As he
I
was not on that closing lineup and was like, hey, look, if Brown's the better defensive option, so be it. Give him a lot of credit there. But I think he looked good on the scoring front.
well,
Like,
and I guess my thought process is like you had Austin Reeves go 5 for 9 from 3.
yep.
You had Anthony Davis shooting 60% field goal percentage. You had Dennis Schroeder 100% from 3 for hitting 2 of them. Lonnie Walker goes 50% from 3. Like, other than D'Angelo Russell, who only had 8 points, everyone else pretty much shot an out of this world percentage. I mean, Hachimura was 72% field goal percentage. Like, that's like, again, I just keep going back to, other than Russell, you really got probably the best games you could be expecting out of those guys, and you didn't win. So I guess the Lakers side of it is like, wow, if we just get a decent game, a back to average game from Russell, he doesn't miss all 3 of his 3-point shots, um, then maybe we are still in this thing, or it swings our way and we get the win.
Well, so it's kind of interesting. You mentioned D'Angelo Russell. I think he's going to be the key on the other side of the ball. Like, I really think defensively, he got torched. I mean,
Yeah.
absolutely torched in game one. And they made a point. I mean, Bruce Brown after the game said, no, they were looking to attack him.
Mhm.
And you do wonder if what the Lakers do, how they adjust. Honestly, Dennis Schroeder held up really well in his minutes. And I do wonder if they lean on him a little bit more. Like, I thought he played well in game one. But yeah, you do have to worry about that. You're right. He's going to have to be a lot better on the offensive end if he's giving it right back on that side of the ball. Um, I don't know. Like, LeBron was super okay.
Yeah.
You're right, because you're right about, though, the depth. Like, the support, every time the supporting cast steps up, you got to feel like you got a shot to win that game.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the way they ended, you got to feel like you left a little bit on the table if you're the Lakers. But if you win game 2, I don't necessarily think it's the end of the world either. Like, you
And
gotta
if
feel good
you
about your adjustments, and you gotta
and
feel like you've got a shot to compete at least, because they were. I mean, that's the thing. They were getting their butt kicked most of that game. Like, Denver was
yeah.
firmly in control for 3 quarters of that game. And you also, like I said, you also do gotta give them credit the way they closed. Like, they could have folded. You start to get alarmed when all of a sudden your double-digit lead shrink real quick. They looked like a contender and held their home court down. Didn't give that advantage away right there.
and
So yeah,
and
no
I would
credit
say
Denver.
too, for the Lakers side, if you can just limit the points off turnovers, right? Like, it was a 14 to 5 swing on that. So if you just bring that, those mistakes down a little bit, or capitalize on yours a little bit more, um, because Denver had more turnovers than the Lakers. So it's like, capitalize on those a little bit more and you're right back in this thing. So I think there are some nuggets that you can hold on to, for lack of for pun intended, I guess, a little bit, that you can hold on to if you're the Lakers, that make you feel like, you capitalize on a few more of these things, and that 126 to 132 is, you know, a 1 point ball game, and next thing you know, a shot goes your way and you win that thing. So I think there is still that possibility. I think from the Nuggets side, you say they got their best games out of 3, maybe 4 of their starters, and we still won. We got this in the bag.
Well, you gotta just feel good if you're the Nuggets, because I mean, this is the thing, and part of it is underestimating them, maybe because they haven't been here before. We haven't seen them fully healthy, but it's like, our pal Sam Albuquerque said it a few weeks ago. It's like maybe we all just did underestimate Denver as the favorite in the West, and after they were the best team all year long.
Mhm.
I mean, Jokic, that was stupid last night. 30, 20, and 10. I mean, he dictated everything too. That's the thing. I mean, guys were all over him. He was making his plays. Like the offense just runs through him. And give Jamal Murray a lot of credit too. Like the fact that he's really stepped his scoring up to playoff levels. Shout out to the bubble. I guess the bubble it will probably come up a little bit later, but spoiler alert for Ballin. But yeah, it really just super impressive win by Denver. They just again they're doing everything they need to do. And all their challenges, anything that I don't know. Anytime, because I feel like after the first round, it's like, oh, maybe they just beat Minnesota. We'll see how it goes. But I mean, man, they steamrolled Phoenix largely. That's a good first win against the Lakers. Like, we got to stop doubting them a little bit too. And I don't think we've been guilty of that necessarily. Like, I'm in the weird spot where it's like, because obviously everyone knows we're big Sixers fans. I'm a big Jokic guy too. Like
I
it's a weird
really
spot with the MVP debate, but like if you go back and you listen to this podcast for the past 3-4 years, like I've got tapes and tapes of saying how much I like Denver.
I really wanted a Embiid Jokic finals matchup.
Yeah, me too. And then guess what? One half of that let us down. So
As per usual.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it ain't there ain't any excuses like there were in the past for some of those Jokic years. Again, we'll get to that in a little bit. But who's balling, who's falling, or wait a minute. Actually, we got to do previews real quick before I do who's balling, or get a prediction there before we go to who's balling, who's falling. Our NBA version of the stock market, we always like to give you the good before the bad. But before we get into balling, real quick though, Justin, what's your WCF preview? I know Denver's up 1-0, but what do you got before?
Yeah, I think it is Denver in 5.
Denver in 5. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Getting
Yeah.
spicy on your
Yeah.
last episode. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
I think it's Denver in 5.
Man, I have Denver in 7. 5 is wild. You got the Lakers losing in 5?
Yep. I just feel like it is Denver's year. I really do feel like
I
it's
don't
Denver's year.
disagree with that, but like the Lakers are good, bro.
I know they are good, but if you keep getting these up and down games from Anthony Davis, and on one of his up games you couldn't capitalize.
I think the up and down has been overrated, I
We'll
guess.
see.
A little bit. We
We'll
will
see.
see. That's a good one, man. A good one for you to end on. All right, on that note, who's balling for you this week?
Ballin for me is gonna go to James Harden. I guess because I don't feel I want to do multiple Fallins actually.
Just do multiple Fallins. I know what James Harden is not balling this week. I am not. I'm over. We're
well,
overriding.
No. I was
gonna
say, I was gonna say because he's balling because he's looking for that money, declining the player option to seek a 4-year deal.
Oh God, that's gross. All right, I'm gonna pretend that didn't happen. We'll move on. We can do a lot of co-falls. We got a lot this week. My ballin', which is actually a ballin', I promise, is the bubble. The conference finals is the same as it was the bubble. Everyone's like, oh, Mickey Mouse finals, it didn't count. And yet here we are again, a few years later, Lakers Nuggets in the West, Celtics Heat in the East. Maybe it wasn't a fluke after all.
Do we just get so does that just mean the Heat are gonna win it all?
Well, the Lakers won it all in that year. So,
I know, but I'm saying the Lakers are going to lose in 5. So then the Heat are the only ones that go to the next round out of that.
Well, what was your prediction that series?
In which one? Celtics?
Yeah.
Probably Celtics. Honestly,
yeah,
I would say Celtics in 6 or 7. 6. I'll say 6.
I'd say Celtics in 6 too. That's what I tweeted out yesterday. Yeah, I mean, if the Heat, obviously, it would be in. I mean, not that they need it, but what it would do for Spo and Jimmy's legacy if they're able to get back to the finals, even just getting there this year, would be. I mean, obviously, if they won, it would be off the charts. I mean, Spo's already a Hall of Famer, and so is Jimmy, honestly. But Jimmy with a ring is a completely different he moves up the pantheon real quick, put it that way. All right, so my fallen for me this week, because I know yours is going to be more about the coaching firings, and that'll segue us nice into our second half. So I'm going to go quickly with fallen here as well, or not quickly, but my fallen is Ja Morant, because Ja Morant's been suspended now indefinitely because he once again is on Instagram Live holding a gun.
Yep.
And it's at the point now where, I mean, first off, he's going to get suspended for a long time. You can't chump the league on guns. Like, they may have given him a slap on the wrist the first time, because what was it, 8 games or so? But we're here essentially, what, 2 months later, and we're talking about Ja Morant doing this again. And
Yeah.
I'm just like, we're in the process of potentially watching one of the biggest bag fumbles I have ever seen in my life. It's not funny. It hasn't been funny. It's obviously extremely disturbing if you're Memphis Grizzlies, both just from a personnel standpoint and from a what is our franchise superstar doing standpoint. Like, this is our guy. This is everything we built this around. I don't know what happens here. Like, obviously, this is a guy who's got a Nike deal. This is a guy who was number 7 in jersey sales last year.
He's got a Dunkaroos endorsement as well, because I actually almost bought them the other day at the grocery store.
That makes so much sense. That is actually the perfect endorsement, which is why this is so amazing to me. Like, I cannot believe, number one, that Ja Morant has friends that are still putting him on Instagram Live with guns.
Well,
but I don't know what's going on here, but it's not funny. And there is obviously there's the greater the greater problem is, and some people have talked about this a little bit. I think JJ Redick most notably the other day is, it is kind of ironic when we are coming down rightfully hard here on Ja Morant, and we report on a mass shooting every 3 days in this country, it feels like, and we have an undeniably massive gun problem in this country, a gun violence problem in this country, and something that a lot of people glorify, to put it bluntly.
well, and that might
And then
be
we're
part
killing
of
Ja over this. Like,
well,
when
and that's
he's
what I
out here.
mean. It might be part of the reason that he's doing that a little bit.
Well, and I mean, look at, and unfortunately, it's the perfect storm, right? Tennessee as a state is one of the most violent states in terms of gun deaths. Memphis is one of the most violent cities in terms of gun deaths. And this is an all everybody thing. This is a rich people, a poor people, a black, a white. Like, this is every class, every gender, every race is affected by gun violence. It's an epidemic in America. So there is a part of me that's like, yeah, it is kind of ironic that we're going to get after the NBA guy who didn't use the weapon, but then we just aren't going to actually deal with the problem, which is the massive amount of guns in society. But all that is, I'm saying to be said is, ja Morant's going to get suspended for a long time, and he is really just blowing it bad. I mean, there's no other way to put it. Like, there's hundreds of millions of dollars you're potentially costing yourself to flash a gun on Instagram Live and be a
To
tough
show
guy
off?
that no one
Yeah.
wants you to be.
To
Like,
show off, yeah.
it's way cooler to be in the NBA than to be flashing guns on Instagram Live, I promise.
I really think a lot of things is better than just being on an Instagram Live, if we're being completely fair.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother part of it.
It's just insane. Like, I can't believe we're doing this twice. And like Adam Silver talked
doesn't
about
he
last night in
have-
the lottery, like, this is and it makes that rehab look like a sham. Like, we already knew it was kind of ridiculous, but like, now it just feels like you're mocking the whole situation.
Well, not only that, it's just like, at what point is not one of his friends is gonna say something? Like, somebody's gotta.
No, I want to know where. Well, and that's a greater question too. Is like, what is the support system doing right now? Ja Morant's dad's at every game. Where's Ja Morant's dad at?
Right, right. Somebody's gotta get it. For lack of a better way to explain it, somebody's got to get in there and like try to clean things
up. Too
up.
much to lose. Like, you like, what are you doing? You're giving away an NBA career. Like, it's just insane to do. Again, to do what? To be a fake tough guy on Instagram? Like,
pretty much.
That's just that's a shame. That's just a damn shame what's going on with Ja Morant right now. And he really, like, it's sad. It's really just, or not sad is the word. I guess it's just more disappointing. It's like, what do your parents say? I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. Like, you have the world is your oyster and you're just doing dumb shit. Like, there's no, for lack of a better term, like, sorry, I know you got to bleep that, but it's just, it's just disappointing.
Well, more disappointing is my fallen, which is just like a bunch of freaking headlines, which is going to be Ty Lue's reps meeting with Clippers to discuss the future. Suns likely to guarantee Chris Paul's contract. Portland expected to make the 3 pick available. I don't think the 3 pick available is a fallen. It's just part of the tweet from Chris. Chris, who tweeted this?
Oh, Chris
Just
Haynes.
Chris Haynes. Yeah, yep. Sorry, it moved. Chris Haynes. So, I think a lot of that could be considered fallen. And then obviously the big overarching fallen is the 76ers, period. All of it in one big bag of suck as its own fallen.
Well, there's the double firings, which are the big story, and I guess the fallen, if you will, because it's not just the Sixers. The Sixers let Doc Rivers go officially, and or not the Celtics, the Suns let Monty Williams go.
Yep.
And so both of them, Monty more than Doc is going to get interviews. Like you imagine, Monty probably gets a job here
You
sooner
don't
than
think Doc
later.
will?
No, no, I think Doc's story is written at this point. Like,
Okay.
why? Why would you hire Doc Rivers at this point?
I
His
don't
last
know.
title was in 08. He kind of flamed out with the Clippers. He kind of flamed out with the Celtics. He kind of flamed out with the Sixers. And it's crazy because this time around with this exit, it wasn't even really Doc Rivers' fault like that. Like, that's what's like, of all the Doc Rivers collapses in the playoffs
It
and
wasn't
them
this
blowing
one.
series leads, I don't really blame this on Doc. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think he made the adjustments necessarily when the Celtics went double big, but I thought rotation wise, the guys he was playing were fine. I think, putting House in game 5 obviously was a big time decision for them. Like, that's a big reason the Sixers won game 5, and it looked like they, finally may have been able to break through, and then they just put up 2 stinkers, and that just really, I mean, there were 4 teams eliminated in the second round. You have the Sixers knocked out, you have the Suns knocked out, you have the Knicks knocked out, and you have the Warriors knocked out. We'll go through all these quick. Obviously, I think right off the rip, there's a massive gap between the disappointments from the Suns and the Sixers and the Knicks and the Warriors. I think for me, and I'll ask you in a second. For me right now, I've got Sixers 1, Suns 2, Warriors 3, Knicks 4 in terms of just sheer disappointment.
Sure. And I would say I think Sixers, Suns, and Warriors are closer to like a bottom of the barrel disappointment than they
Yes.
are closer to the Knicks.
Less with the Warriors for me, because at the end of the day, the Warriors won the title last year. Like,
But that's what I mean. It's like you didn't even get back. You didn't even
I
get back there to
know.
try.
It's really hard. They've won 4 in the last
I
7
know.
years. Like, I
But-
get it, because you want to maximize Steph
but-
every year. You do. You want to, as long as you have Steph Curry, you want to get there every year. You feel like they had a window. And it's
But
also just hard for me to be like, that's as soul crushingly defeating as a loss as when you're the Sixers and when you're the Suns and when you have
I
to
agree.
kind of, when you're looking at reevaluating everything. If the Warriors dynasty ends, so be it. All NBA dynasties end. And I think you're definitely bummed if you're a Warriors fan, because there were just like a lot of things happen in their season. Like, guys are finally admitting that, yeah, Draymond Green and Jordan Poole don't really like each other.
Well, and that's what I
that's
mean.
been a tough slog the whole time.
And that's what I mean is that's what makes it worse. Is like now we're coming out and now you know that you're going to have to make some decent amount of changes and figure these things out. And you probably were going
Yeah.
to do it anyway, but it's like, oof, here we are. It
Well,
sucks.
Everything got maximized. It's like, and unfortunately, Jordan Poole had a horrible playoffs. There's no way around it. Like, he just was terrible down the stretch. It seemed like, yeah, he was off. He didn't have that swag that he had last year when they were just pulling up and winning. Like, the Jordan Poole, you live with the bad, which is pretty much his entire defensive ability, because he just can pull up and be a game breaker sometimes. And that's what he was last year for them. This year, he just wasn't that, unfortunately, when they needed him to be. The decline of Klay Thompson also looked really like alarming and glaring this year. Like, Klay just didn't have it in the second round. He's not the defender he once was because of the injuries, and just the shots weren't falling. The game 6 Klay had 2 of the worst games of his career when it mattered. And so that's kind of like, that's one of those things where, you already know Dre's limited on an offensive end at this point. He can still give you the defense, but like, you do know that is there to an extent. Steph is Steph, but yeah, I mean, Wiggins only didn't play for most of the year. Obviously they adjusted well enough to beat Sacramento, but it's hard. It's hard to win an NBA title. And so I think, yes, there's that disappointment there because you want to get as many as you can. And you know what a 5th title would do for everybody's legacy. Not that it needs a boost at this point. Like, these guys have 4 rings for most of them. And even the younger guys now with Wiggins and with Jordan Poole have 1 as well. Like, that's a locker room full of champions. But yeah, I'm not going to also like, play the violin exactly for the defending like the Warriors have had plenty of success. It's hard for me to be like, oh, that's a earth-shattering disappointment here either.
Well, I agree it's not as bad and earth-shattering as the disappointment for the Suns and the
I
76ers.
just
That
thought
I
you were
can
gonna
get
stop at
behind.
the Suns. That would have been funny.
No.
Um,
No,
no,
yeah.
I mean, if we want to recap, like the Knicks are at the bottom for sure, because I don't think like the Knicks. You have a question about Julius Randle. You for sure you do. Like Julius was bad in the playoffs. Like he was bad in the second round. I think you got to see what RJ Barrett's development looks like. You hope that continues to come along, like
But I
particularly the
think
shot.
but I think at the end of the day, because you're New York, and I know we always go back to it, and you showed that you were ready for that next step. You're gonna have guys that are gonna be very interested in coming to that team.
Yeah, Brunson was great. Obviously, that contract continues to be. I mean, and some of these guys just had bad play. Emmanuel quickly was just bad in the playoffs after being pretty
Mhm.
good for them all year, being a big spark off their bench. Um, you beat Cleveland. I feel like most people thought that was and pretty convincingly beat Cleveland. So I think most people thought that was an upset. You hung with Miami and going to 6, which I think that maybe becomes a little disappointing just because, you thought you were playing the Bucks where you wouldn't be favored, where with Miami, it feels like that's a more beatable team. And, you have that chance to get back to the conference finals. But
Clearly not with Jimmy.
well, and I think when you get in, but yeah, again, when you look at what the expectations were for the Knicks going into the season, the fact that they got back into the playoffs after missing last year, pretty convincingly won a first round series. Like you said, that it provides that stability. It allows New
Mhm.
York to be an attraction. And like, yeah, as long as they continue to manage their cap well, like they're going to be in the conversation for every star that's out there. So yeah, I think there's definitely, a little bit of disappointment, I guess, with the way Randall played, but that's minimal and it pales compared to the other two. Um, with we'll save the Sixers for last because it's just going to be clear the paint and go ISO at that point because this is like I got 10 years of frustration to talk about. So let's talk about Phoenix first. Obviously, when you trade Kevin Durant or when you trade for Kevin Durant, you go all in. They just didn't have the depth. Like it was basically a better version of Dallas. Like those 2 games they won, Booker was shooting like 80% and Kevin Durant was shooting historically well from the field. Like you feel good about that duo. Obviously, like that's one of the best scoring duos you can get in the NBA. The question is going to be where do they get the depth from? And do they really rearrange deck chairs? You mentioned Chris Paul's contract. They say they're going to guarantee that, but does that get do they try to move him or buy that contract out and let him go somewhere else?
Yep, and the frustration that it seemed we were seeing from Ayton, like,
Yeah.
what do you do with
Oh,
that? And
Ayton's the big one, and it sure seems like Ayton's gonna be traded, and they've already made a big move by firing Monty Williams.
yep.
This is a guy who had them in the finals just a few years ago. Like, that's the first domino to fall. Maybe that paves things over with Ayton,
Well,
but the other reality is just Ayton's looked pedestrian at times when they've
and
needed him to be elite.
and what doesn't help things either is the new CBA agreement is
Mhm.
going to really hinder them from being able to potentially build some guys and build the roster around the guys and the money they already have spent or are spending. So that's going to be a very interesting part as well. Um,
Yeah, they don't have a lot of draft picks, like,
nope,
and that's the tough part is you don't really know. Like, you're not gonna be bad. You have Kevin Durant, Devin Booker. You're not gonna be bad. And a lot of
no.
veteran guys will probably be intrigued in playing with them. Like, I do think there'll be a buyout destination. But yeah, I mean, you're right. They're really gonna have to nail this offseason, particularly if they move 8 and I wanna see what the haul is. Like, that could do a lot. I mean, certainly from a draft pick front, it could. Um, and it's valid at this point. Like, the fact that, like you said, you're playing Jock Landale over DeAndre Ayton in the playoffs, like, I don't know. Like it's kind of looked funny 2 years in a row, and I think when you just unfortunately it's the way you lost. Like it's the way you go out. It's 30 plus points, and now in multiple playoff games to end your season. Like yeah, that's an earth shattering loss if you're Phoenix. And I know they obviously made some pretty big changes, so it feels different than last year. But at the end of the day, it's a tough off season. I do want to see who they go with on the coaching front. Obviously, plenty of I mean, we know the names that are out there. Nick Nurse is out there. Budenholzer's out there. Mike D'Antoni's been a name that's been always consistently floated around. Like there's going to be a number of head coaches out there. But yeah, I don't know. What do you think? Like, you would trade Aiton, right?
Yeah, I think so, and I would wonder, and I feel like we have this conversation a lot, but I feel like the Mavericks might be interested. I feel like maybe you could talk to the Hawks about, Collins, depending on the money. Again, that would be a big factor in that potential trade. But yeah, I would imagine you look at that. And from the coaching side of things, though, wouldn't you say the Suns probably are the number one destination for a coach right now in the NBA? Like, I would take
No,
that job over
Milwaukee.
most. You
I
still
think
think
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee?
Yeah, they got Giannis.
Yeah, but they got KD and Booker.
Yeah, but you got Giannis. I think Giannis is the best player in the league right
Okay.
now, and they've won a championship recently. Like, the core is still
Yeah.
largely there. I don't know. I feel better about Milwaukee's future than I do about and I think Milwaukee has some questions they got to ask themselves too, obviously. But
Mhm.
I feel much better about Milwaukee's long term than I do about Phoenix, just because I don't know how Phoenix maneuvers. Like the war
Yeah.
chest is not. It's not very deep. It's not quite as it's not as bleak as it was in Dallas, but
No,
it
but I
does
think you
remind me of a
like
better version of that.
right, but I think you like with Landale, I think you liked what you saw in the playoffs when Ayton started to go ghost mode. You know what I mean? And I think you'll be able to get most vets who want to try to win a ring. So like I still think you'll be able to find ways to work around it. It's going to be tough and it's not going to be I don't think it's going to be flashy, I guess is the best way to put it, you know?
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't think it's going to be either. Um, which leads us to the Philadelphia 76ers, and they are at number one for me because I think, I mean, look, this podcast has tracked with the process. That's just the
Mhm.
way that our lives happened. You graduated college in 2013. I graduated in 2013. You started part time at the radio station in Jacksonville. I moved down there in August. We started the podcast February, and the rest has been history. And obviously, going into that 2013 season was when they started to tear it down. They traded Drew Holiday. They had drafted Michael Carter Williams and Nerlens Noel. They knew Nerlens was going to play the first year. And look, we don't need to go relitigate history. And there are a couple things I want to get out of the way before I start. And let me
Well,
start this
well,
by
well,
saying,
I have a question
okay,
because we just talked about coaching once and about how the Bucks are probably the number one coaching destination for open positions.
mhm,
Would you say that the 76ers coaching position is the least desirable
no,
in the
no, not
NBA
even,
right now?
no, not even close. You have Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey.
Right, right. But I almost would rather go coach a rebuilding team, which I know the 76ers pretty much probably have to be as well, but I'd rather go coach a rebuilding team with zero drama than come in with whatever this is for the Sixers right now.
No, I think we're overestimating how, like, even as doom and gloomy as I'm going to be, I wouldn't go that far. Like, I
Okay.
think they're not at that unserious of a level yet. Now, I will say this also depends what the Harden contract looks like. If Harden gets a 4-year max, the Sixers window's closed. Like, period. It's over. There's nothing else that they'll be able to do cap wise. It doesn't matter if they move Tobias Harris. Like, they're just going to be stuck with a guy who's not good enough. And that's just like, here's the thing. Like, we're 10 years into this. Joel Embiid is great. We could every other year, basically, I've had an excuse. And I think there are plenty of things that have gone wrong. Like, we don't need to rehash the Bridges trade. We don't need to rehash Jimmy Butler getting allowed to walk out the door. We don't need to rehash Ben Simmons not developing. Like, we could do this for days. The line of thinking I'm always going to defend because I think it was just the right line of thinking of what the franchise could do. Um, I'm also just out of excuses. Like, I'm out of excuses for this team. I'm not going to pretend like they're anything they're not anymore. Like, they're just not good enough. They're not. I can't sit here on this podcast and talk about, Portland, for example, who's a team that I've been saying should blow it up, and some of these other ones for a while, and just not start to have that conversation with the Sixers because for the first time, I don't have an excuse. I don't
Mhm.
have a desire to defend them. It's not, and the crazy part is like Doc got fired. This wasn't even really Doc's fault. The real question at this point is, and this is what is the most murky about the Sixers, and that we unfortunately have to ask ourselves: I don't know that Joel Embiid is good enough to be a number one option on a championship team because I've seen them lose in the second round now for 6 straight years.
I think he's good enough to be the number one option. I don't think he has the leadership about him that will elevate the other players, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was tremendously disappointed. Like there's no way around it. And it's the type of disappointment that I mean, Justin, this is a franchise that literally punted on fire, a fan base that was willing to punt 5 years
Yep.
to just build it and do it right and understand the plan. And like, there's a reason they were able to do this as long as they can. And it's just like the reward's not there anymore. I've seen this movie before. I've seen this team before. I know how this is going to play out. These were the two most meaningful Sixers games in 21 years. Justin, they haven't won a meaningful game since we were in fourth grade. They
Yep.
haven't been in the conference finals in 2001. They made the finals that year. We
Yep.
haven't been close since. You know how many franchises have made the conference finals since then? It's basically everyone.
Mhm.
Sacramento's been there more recently than us.
Which is wild.
Like, I just, and there's no one else to blame this time around except the stars. Joel Embiid was horrible when it mattered. The MVP had 15 points in a game clinching game 7. And that's the crazy part. If they lost to Boston, I said Boston was going to win that series in 6 on this podcast. If they lost to Boston in 7 games, but went out with a little bit of dignity, I don't even think I'd have been that upset about it. I'd be bummed, but I wouldn't be just near the apathy that I am now. If Embiid had 40 points, if he had 30 and 20, if Harden just showed any remote amount of aggression. And with Harden, maybe you're not that surprised. You've seen this before.
Mhm.
Embiid, man, that was that was a legacy altering loss. I don't know that Embiid is just unmovable for me now anymore. I don't know that he's going to get any better. He's 30 years old, or he's about to be 30 years old. Like we're in his prime. And there's plenty to talk about how the Sixers potentially wasted it, but it's like this year was different. The supporting cast was there in the first half. PJ Tucker played great. Mellon played great all year for the most part. Tyrese Maxey at least still cared. I didn't feel like Embiid cared at the end. I didn't love his body language. I hated the lack of accountability largely in post game. I'm disappointed from top down because I think this franchise is just rotten. I think it's rotten from top down. I don't have faith in the ownership. I don't have faith in the front office. I didn't love Daryl Morey's press conference today. I don't feel like he has any clue of how to get us out of this. I don't know that Embiid is the guy. And, here we are 10 years later, and I don't really feel better about the franchise than I did 10 years ago. Like, I feel like it's sick. Now, instead of losing in the first round every year, they lose in the second round every year because you didn't even give yourself the ability to complete the process fully. Like, I'm reaching apathy. Like, that's the most, this podcast has taught me that I enjoy watching other basketball other than the Sixers more than them at this point. They don't care. So why do I care? Why do I put myself emotionally, time-wise, into defending this franchise and making the investment and, buying in and trying to think that it's different when it's just not going to be? Like, they haven't won a title since 1983. They're just kind of a losing franchise. Like, they have all this history because they've existed, but you talk about this rivalry with Boston. What rivalry? Boston beats us every year.
Yeah.
We beat Boston since the 80s. What rivalry? It's not a rivalry when one side wins all the time. They haven't got there with Miami. They haven't got there with Milwaukee. Giannis or Embiid made the post game. He had the similar to Giannis thing. Giannis has won a title. He can talk about and make that corny, oh, it's not a failure. It's a step along the journey. Giannis is a title. He can back that up. It's gross, dude. It's gross. And I'm really just disappointed. I'm disappointed all around. And it's franchise altering for me. I don't know where this franchise goes. I think they are really going to close their window 100% if they bring Harden back on a big deal.
Yeah, I don't think you can bring him back.
No, I would let him walk. I don't think he's good enough. And it's crazy because he had two of his best playoff games ever. Like he won them the game in game 1 and game 4, but it doesn't matter when you're so ineffective in the other ones. He was unplayable in game 7.
Well, that's what I was just saying is like I would almost prefer consistency over just taking over a game or two. Like just give me close to 18, 20 points a game and 8 assists instead of, one game we're dropping 45 and then the next game we can't hit a bucket.
Yeah,
Like
I
I would
mean,
rather the consistency.
yeah, it's just like, you do Embiid, Maxey, in depth. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world, but I don't have any faith in this franchise to deliver and do what it needs to. Like there's not a good organization. Like, you talk to yourselves and you get that realization as you watch these teams over and over again. And it's just,
And
this
it's
has been the same team for 20 plus years. Like we probably haven't pasted them enough because they had the process and we thought it was finally a plan. And the fact that they probably didn't get enough flack for even bailing on that early. Like you just learn how it's going to go, unfortunately. And that's the crazy part is it's just like you've lost the hardcore fans now. Like that's what I don't think the Sixers realize. And they should look across town with the Flyers and how bad that's gone in the past few years, where it's like, I don't think the Sixers as a franchise realize how in danger they are of just losing everybody. Like, I don't care at this point. Like I don't care about the regular season for the Sixers. I don't really care about the playoffs until you prove to me that you can get beyond the second round. Like it's not going to be different until you make it different. And you could sit here and say, oh, well, maybe if a couple shots. So we're talking about a different story and we're talking about the conference finals. Sure. You can do that with any team every year. It's
and
just the reality is they haven't delivered. And you have to ask yourself now, are these guys good enough? And the answer is, unfortunately, I don't think they are.
And it sucks too because it should be although we lost, a happy end to the season because Embiid got MVP. It's like, there were supposed to be these positive vibes. It just didn't.
No, it took a
There.
week. It took a week to destroy them. That's even after game 5, everyone was so like, no one was nervous necessarily, but it was just like you had such a potential for joy after that game 5. And then they just went out and put up the most Sixers of Sixers performances of all time in game 6, at the end of game 6, particularly, and in game 7. Like they can't get over the hump. They're just a bunch of losers, unfortunately.
Well, and
That's
that's
the way I
why.
feel about the Sixers at this point. Like, except for PJ Tucker. PJ Tucker deserves no slander at all. I mean, none. He's worth every penny. He's a consummate winner.
Yeah, and it was one of those things. That's why I said it on Twitter. Was tweeting with some of the guys that we usually tweet with, and I was like, this one hurts way more than the other ones, and I thought
Yeah.
it couldn't hurt more than the Kawhi Leonard corner shot 3 going in. I didn't think it could be worse than that, and this is significantly
It's
worse than
crazy
that.
because, like, I didn't think it could be worse than that, and then it's been worse twice since
Yeah,
then. That Atlanta loss was worse, and then
Yep.
this loss was worse. Like,
Yep.
this was, I mean, Atlanta was inexcusable because we were better than Atlanta, and that we just didn't beat them. I'm sorry, and I know Atlanta fans may swarm me for that one. We were better than that Atlanta team, and they know it, and we know it, and we just didn't handle our business. I got nothing for this time around, and this is this is the way that they lost. They were losers. Like that was a legacy defining. Kyle Neubeck said it best in the Philly Inquirer. That was a legacy defining choke job for Joel Embiid and James Harden. And that's brutal to say, but that's going to be the reality until they prove it otherwise. Like it's,
And I think, and I think for James Harden and Chris Paul in general, we're at the point where it's what's the saying? If it quacks like a duck, it's at this point, like, why would we believe they can do anything more in the playoffs?
Even Harden and Chris Paul got to finals. It's crazy.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
it's, and I get it. Those legacies are well deserved, but man, it's just, gotta love apathy, baby. Nothing like it. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode of the Drive and Dish NBA podcast. In a way, it's helped me because it's made me kind of just realize that there are more important things, like watching the finals, enjoying that basketball, and like you have your daughter coming, and it's just like I'm not going to be miserable over this team anymore. They're not worth it. They're not worth. And that was like my coming to Jesus moment. It was just like they are not worth my emotional capacity anymore.
I completely agree with you.
See, old me would have ranted 5 seasons ago and would have just been mad. That's the crazy part is that it's like I can't even get mad about this franchise anymore. I just am I'm defeated. I am fully defeated at this point. Leave us a review on iTunes, good or bad. We'll read them on the podcast. If you're not an Apple user, Google Play Store, Spreaker, Spotify, Amazon Music, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, anywhere you can find a podcast, you can find us.
And obviously, you can find us on YouTube. Just search Driving Dish NBA, and you can find us there. According to Google, Kevin, in case you need this, we'll end on this. One, you need to give yourself time to reflect. Allow yourself time to make sense of what went wrong. Adjust your expectations. Don't let your disappointment linger. And number four, make sure you look after your physical health. Those are the top four things you're supposed to do when you feel overwhelmed by disappointment. So good luck.